The ultimate dilemma for Pascoe in a case too close to home. And on Sunday night at 9 on BBC One, don't miss a brand new series of Waking the Dead.
They were happy together until his past caught up with him.
I have the right to know the charges.
No, you don't. Not when national security is involved.
They were accusing me of something that I didn't do.
Only 2 of these eyewitnesses are on their list.
What happened to the other 5?
High Crimes, a BBC One premiere tomorrow at 9.
This is BBC One Southwest. Now the news presented by Fiona Bruce with Janine Jansen.
There are desperate scenes in New Orleans tonight as thousands beg for help and violence erupts across the city. Up to 300,000 people still need to be evacuated from New Orleans and the neighboring states. Rescue comes for some, but the mood turns to anger after a 4th day for many without food or water. The mayor issues an SOS for help for the 20,000 people trapped in a convention center. President Bush warns Americans the crisis could threaten petrol supplies and tells them to conserve energy. Also tonight, on video, the testament of one of the British suicide bombers before the London attacks. Anguish and anger from the survivors of Beslan a year on. And the big stars turn out for the Venice Film Festival with more Hollywood premieres than ever before.
In the southwest, fearing the worst, families here waiting for news about loved ones caught up in Hurricane Katrina. And finally laid to rest the airmen who spent years undiscovered.
Good evening. Conditions in New Orleans are becoming increasingly desperate, with the thousands of people stranded there begging for help. Violent looting is taking place across the city, fires are raging, and gun battles are hampering the rescue effort. After Monday's hurricane, tens of thousands of people are still trapped around the city's Superdome, another 20,000 in the convention center, with no food or water and little way of getting out. The mayor of the city has issued what he's calling a desperate SOS for supplies and buses to help the evacuation. There are reports that some of the sick and injured are dying, and there are abandoned bodies on the streets. Rescue teams are struggling to reach people across the Gulf Coast, made homeless when Hurricane Katrina struck land and the flooding that followed. In a moment, we'll be hearing from David Willis in the Mississippi coastal town of Biloxi. But first, Matt Fry is in New Orleans. Matt.
Fiona, I drove into the city just a few hours ago, and I must say it was one of the scarier journeys I've done in America. This place looks and feels like a Hollywood disaster set, but it is very much for real. There are an awful lot of people on the streets here with guns who shouldn't have them. And just a few hours ago, there were several shootouts round the corner. The battle between nature and man is almost over. The battle between man and man is just beginning. This is New Orleans, one of the great historic cities of America. Today it felt like Bedlam underwater.
We need somebody to come into this city and help us. We need the National Guard. Mr. Bush, please send somebody down here to help us. They're raping babies, raping women, killing people. We don't have no food, no water. They got old people stuck in their houses that don't have legs, that can't walk. We need some help. Please send somebody to help us. Please send somebody to help us.
When they gonna come out and help the people, man? Get them to help the people. Where's George Bush? Where's George Bush?
He's coming tomorrow, but they're already here. The National Guard, many of their colleagues are fighting in Iraq. Those who aren't are here helping, or increasingly trying to impose law and order. The Superdome, balding thanks to Katrina's ferocious winds. In drier times, this is the home of the New Orleans Saints. Today, there is nothing saintly about this wretched place. It's become the eye of the human storm, where the desperate huddle to be evacuated, or at least fed. 20,000 took refuge here under appalling conditions. Now they're being bused to Houston, Texas, before this ignites into a riot.
No food, no water, no nothing. Whatever we had, we've been taking it. That's the only way we could survive.
Somebody needs to come take charge and put organization and get these people to safety, to get them clothes, the basic things that they need to live from day to day.
It's not about low income, it's not about rich people, poor people, it's about people. Nobody wants to hurt anybody in this city. Nobody wants to hurt these people who have these businesses.
The misfortune of New Orleans is that this is a city wedged between a river, a lake, and the Gulf of Mexico. 500,000 people living below sea level. On Tuesday, when the levees broke, it filled like a bathtub. In some areas, the water rose as high as 20 feet. 3 days later, they're still picking up survivors wherever they can find them. The remnants of this family were scooped up by basket. Others are still waiting. From the air, the destruction is humbling. Luxury yachts tossed about like discarded toys.
Thrown around like someone
broken highways, like unfinished puzzles.
Dumped them out of the sky in one spot.
But look closer, much closer, and this is what you find. Stagnant water, now a breeding pond for diseases of all kind. And then, of course, the survivors, the vast majority of them poor, black, and angry. And of course, one of the extraordinary things, Fiona, is that 4 days after the hurricane hit here, we still have no exact idea of the number of dead. I mean, if you go into the streets here and there, you will find dead bodies lying around. It almost seems like Banderacha in some places. Of course, the scale of the tsunami was much, much bigger than this. But the point is that although we live in the information age, all the information networks have broken down, and this place is back in an age in which it thought it would never return to.
Matt, we saw scenes of chaos and despair in your piece there. Tell us a bit more about what you've seen there on the ground today.
Well, it is a very funny situation because New Orleans is normally a city full of tourists. This is the high season for this sort of thing. This is Canal Street that I'm standing on, one of the main thoroughfares of the city. There'd be shops and cafes. And of course, it now looks like one of these sort of Hollywood disaster sets. You have mainly black Americans, African Americans in the streets, still looting. We just saw a shop 50 yards from here with a family inside taking whatever they could, and no police presence at all to try and stop them. They were saying to us that they were desperate, they needed the nappies, they needed the food, they needed the water. Just down the road, about half a mile from here, there's a conference center, which you saw in my piece, where there are more than 2,000 people holed up with absolutely nothing, no help. And you wonder how that could be possible when you've got scores of Black Hawk helicopters and Chinook helicopters whizzing through the skies, based not far from here, bringing in aid and bringing in supplies. And then, of course, there are some areas of the city where the National Guard, armed to the teeth, won't even go because they're too scared. So I'm afraid New Orleans has reached a low that people really didn't think it would reach when the hurricane came on Monday, when they thought that they had averted the worst. And then, of course, the walls broke and the water came in.
Matt, thanks very much indeed. The seaside resort of Biloxi in Mississippi took the full force of the hurricane. Much of the town has been destroyed and thousands of people are without clean water, food or power. Our correspondent David Willis joined rescue workers in the town and sent this report.
It's become an unlikely symbol of Katrina's awesome strength. The Lunar Sea sits atop a mountain of debris in downtown Biloxi, a quarter of a mile from its mooring. Like virtually everything else here, it was picked up and hurled by a hurricane, behaving like a petulant child. The aftermath is posing a major challenge for rescue teams, charged with checking every building in this sprawling coastal town. This beachfront hotel was totally submerged by waters whipped up by Hurricane Katrina.
If you look around, you can see all the windows, everything's blown out, which is telling us that water just came right through the whole hotel.
What does that say about the force of Hurricane Katrina?
Oh, it's just unbelievable, unbelievable. The power of water, it just wipes out everything.
Sniffer dogs have been brought in to help with the search, along with manpower from virtually every state in the Union. The sheer force of Katrina's wrath is manifest all along this coastline. A floating casino broke its mooring and smashed into the hotel next door. Trapped and terrified hotel guests used bed sheets to plead for help. They're now unaccounted for, another problem for the hard-pressed search and rescue teams. It's less about rescue now, more about recovery, the recovery of bodies from buildings like this, which were the first in the path of Hurricane Katrina. Kelly Grisham's home is nearby. It was flattened by the hurricane, and she's now living in a car on the beach.
It's better than the shelter because it stinks in the shelter. There isn't no water, and at least we can be alone here and have no problems with nobody, so we're here.
And for those who still have a home, there's the constant threat of looting. Donald Thomas has written a message on the wall of his home. He says were it not for his flatmate, he'd have never survived.
If you're sleeping at nighttime, you got a handful of canned goods, people trying to come in and get them, you know? I look at it this way, it's like a battle zone, you know?
Bulldozers have started clearing the streets of debris after rats were seen taking residence amongst the rubble. Initial projections put the number of people dead here in the tens or hundreds, but officials in Biloxi are now preparing for the possibility that more than 1,000 died in this small coastal town alone. David Willis, BBC News, Biloxi, Mississippi.
Experts said it could take a month to get all the water out of New Orleans. The flooding has left most of the city under 8 feet of water, and the pumping system is ruined. David Shukman reports on why the flood defences failed so catastrophically and how quickly they can be rebuilt.
Again, there's the levee break in the...
This was the moment the city was lost to a deluge that'll take years to recover from. New Orleans has always relied on protection from the waters around it, so a breach, like this one, was to prove catastrophic. The floodwaters have swamped this popular historic city, and even now its streets are filling with the overflow from the sewers. The city had defenses, but they failed. New Orleans was always vulnerable below sea level and sandwiched between the Mississippi River and a lake. Now, it depended on walls, or levees as they're known, encircling the city, but the storm surge was overwhelming, and a city 200 years old was flooded in a matter of hours. Now, this satellite image shows the center of New Orleans before the hurricane. This is what it looks like now. The highway left dipping above and below the waterline. And here again, a stadium and a park before the flood and after. So, could this have been avoided? Some say the defense was never strong enough.
This levee was built for a Category 3 storm. This storm came in much stronger than Category 3. Question is, should we have been investing money years before, we as a society, putting an investment into making it available to handle larger capacity storms?
Tonight, the first sandbags were readied for use, the first step towards repairing the levees and then pumping out the city all as quickly as possible. And this matters more than ever now. Hurricane Katrina won't be the last hurricane of the season. Several more are predicted. That's because sea temperatures are so high. This map, produced by the U.S. National Hurricane Center, shows temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico at record levels. Inside this line, the water's more than 30 degrees centigrade, well above the threshold needed to trigger more huge storms. And even tonight, they're tracking a new one out in the Atlantic. This one's called Lee, and it may yet develop into a hurricane. An oil slick on the floodwater. Recovery will be a massive challenge, but even harder will be getting ready for the next one. David Shukman, BBC News.
Tonight, President Bush told Americans to conserve energy supplies amid fears that the damage to oil refineries could cause a shortage. He told them not to buy petrol if they didn't need it. America may have to rely on supplies from European countries and elsewhere, which could have global consequences. Our economics editor, Avon Davis, has more details.
On the forecourt, Americans are seeing prices surge. Tempers sometimes rising too. And this evening, we heard President Bush talk in more somber tones about energy than we've ever heard before.
The good folks must understand that
major refineries have been shut down, which means it's going to be hard to get gasoline to some markets. Steps we're taking will help address the problem of availability, but it's not going to solve it. Americans should be prudent in their use of energy during the course of the next few weeks. Don't buy gas if you don't need it.
Here in Britain, for the last year, we've been talking about high oil prices pushing up the price of petrol. Today, though, it's petrol itself which is the story. You can't run cars on crude oil, and there's a shortage of refineries to turn that into petrol. Hurricane Katrina has made that problem worse, taking out 9 refineries. One is due to restart this weekend, others could take months. Have a look at the pattern of price movements in the last month. The price of crude oil has risen about 11%. But in the US, the wholesale price of petrol has risen far more, over 40%. And the rub is, that's affected wholesale petrol prices here in Europe. That must affect our pump prices, as the continents are connected by petrol.
Well, obviously there's no shortage of petrol in Europe, but there is a shortage of petrol in America. So what that's done is increase the price of petrol in America to attract petrol from Europe across the Atlantic to get to America.
And tankers are being booked to carry refined petrol from Europe to the States. In fact, the price of transatlantic tanker space has doubled in the last few days.
We've already seen a rush for about 20 ships to take petrol from Europe to America, which is more than you've normally seen chartered like this in a couple of days.
European Union countries do keep emergency stocks of petrol. In the next few days, we have to decide whether this constitutes enough of an emergency to release some. Evan Davis, BBC News.
The London suicide bomber Mohammed Sadiq Khan, who blew up an underground train on July the 7th, has been shown in a video tonight explaining his motives. In the broadcast shown on the Arabic television station Al Jazeera, Khan describes himself as a soldier at war. The video also shows al-Qaeda's second-in-command, Ayman al-Zawahiri, who warns of similar attacks to come. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Margaret Gilmore, reports.
It's 8 weeks to the day since the London bombs were detonated. 6 people died in the attack at Edgware Road. We now know the bomb here was planted by a classroom assistant from Leeds, Mohammed Sadiq Khan. This evening, the Arab television station Al Jazeera was sent a verbal suicide message from him, a tape. We do not know whether it was made days or even months before the attacks, but the message is chilling. The tape has clearly been edited, but did he record it in the UK or during a visit he made to Pakistan? Did he know an interview with al-Qaeda's second-in-command, Ayman al-Zawahiri, would be edited onto the same tape, in which he implies al-Qaeda was behind the attack? Al-Zawahiri says the bombings were a direct response to Britain's foreign policies, a slap on the face of Tony Blair. He warns the battle has now been transferred to the land of the enemy. But earlier today, the government said again it believes the bombings could not be blamed on the war with Iraq.
It is my judgment that the world and we would have faced such attacks even if there had been no military action whatsoever in respect of Iraq.
The intelligence services have always assumed there could be an al-Qaeda link. They must now work out whether this tape confirms that or whether it's simply al-Qaeda making the claims for political gain. Either way, it doesn't necessarily help those investigating the bombs who have still not established the actual names of those who masterminded the attacks. Margaret Gilmore, BBC News, MI5.
Our political editor, Nick Robinson, is in Downing Street. Nick, first of all, what's the likely impact of this tape?
Well, Fiona, I think the first impact will be to chill people to the marrow, to hear a fellow countryman in the familiar accent of West Yorkshire, a man who gave much of his life to teaching underprivileged children, say ever so calmly, "This is why I'm a soldier in the name of Islam. This is why I regard you all as legitimate targets in my war," will shock and horrify people. On the other hand, will it surprise that he uses the excuse of military action around the world by democratic governments? No. Will it surprise that al-Qaeda claim responsibility? No. Will it surprise that they're capable of extraordinary feats of propaganda as well as extraordinary feats of horrific terrorism? No. And that's perhaps why, with Tony Blair back in Downing Street for the first day since his holidays, he and they are saying nothing in response to this.
Well, Mohammed Sadiq Khan, as you say, clearly talking about the war against Iraq. Jack Straw, we heard just now, saying that Britain was vulnerable to attack whether we went to war in Iraq or not.
That's right. That has led people, of course, to suggest that he and the government are somehow in denial. Now, ever since he first suggested there was no link at all, the Foreign Secretary, government ministers, including he, have ever so delicately been stepping away from that position. Now they say that this is an excuse, the war with Iraq, not that there's no connection at all. Just the latest excuse, they say, because, of course, before 9/11, there was no Iraq war, no Afghanistan, to use an excuse. But that didn't stop Ken Clarke in his first speech in the Tory leadership campaign today saying Tony Blair must be the only person alive who, if he believes it, believes there was no link between the London bombs and the war with Iraq.
Nick, thanks very much. There's been a fierce gun battle tonight on the bridge in Baghdad where nearly 1,000 people died yesterday in a stampede. It's believed Shiites and Sunnis exchanged fire, killing a 12-year-old girl. Yesterday's tragedy happened after rumours of a suicide bomber triggered panic among Shiite worshippers at a religious ceremony. Jonathan Charles has more from Baghdad.
A desperate search. A mother looks for her missing daughter on a bridge which has left many without hope. Others are on a similar mission, sifting through sandals abandoned when the pilgrims fled, hoping for clues as to the whereabouts of relatives. The river Tigris is still being trawled for bodies. Many of the 1,000 victims jumped into the water, escaping the stampede triggered by rumours that a suicide bomber was in the midst of yesterday's Shiite religious festival. Sabi says, I can't find my son. I've tried all the hospitals, but to no avail. If there's no news at the bridge, with a heavier heart, families go to hastily set up mortuaries. One man telephones home to say his quest is over. This sight was all too familiar on the roads of Baghdad today. 60-year-old Hashim Nasser is on a final journey. Hashim's sons and brothers are distraught. Some Shiites blame Sunni insurgents for spreading the suicide bomber rumours, which led to so many deaths. Hashim's cousin told us infiltrators sparked the panic. Around almost every corner today, there seemed to be another funeral. The dead are being treated as martyrs, victims of the tension, which is pushing Iraq's Shiite and Sunni communities further apart. Tonight, that tension is evident. Shiites and Sunnis exchanging weapon fire across the bridge where yesterday's tragedy occurred. Hardly surprising in this highly charged atmosphere. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Baghdad.
A year ago today, terrorists seized a school in the small Russian town of Beslan and took more than 1,000 people hostage. 331 people were killed in the three-day siege, more than half of them children. Today there were anguished and angry scenes as survivors and families gathered to remember the dead. Our correspondent Damien Grammaticus was there.
1 year ago, Azamat and his mother were gathering flowers, gifts for his teacher on the first day of school. Today, the flowers they took were in memory of friends and relatives who died in Beslan's siege. At 9:15 precisely, a bell tolled and solemn music filled the air. 1 year exactly from the moment the school was seized. Azamat and Svetlana joined the procession of mourners. Everywhere was the awful sound of crying, of grief still raw. Svetlana hurried through the gym where she'd been held hostage, this place too painful for her to linger in. Others could only stand, lost in their mourning.
It hurts to see the charred walls, where we and our children were burning alive. Everything here reminds me of how our children were suffering. I think this place should be knocked down.
But some mothers want the school preserved. It's a place where they can still reach out to touch their children. As well as the continuing stream of grief, there is a growing sense of anger and injustice here. There are several official investigations into what happened, but none have released their findings yet. And the mothers of Beslan in particular want someone brought to account for the loss of their children. So today, the mothers released a letter signed by 500 people. They say they were betrayed by President Putin and blame most of the deaths on the storming of the school itself. And the anger spilled over when the head teacher tried to visit the gym. She was shoved away by parents who blame her too for the loss of their children. So 1 year on, Beslan is a place riven by its pain, unable to find solace, still heartbroken and anguished. Damien Chromaticus, BBC News, Beslan.
Now, the Venice Film Festival may be the oldest in the world, but it's often been overlooked by many of the big Hollywood names. This year, however, the festival is hosting more Hollywood premieres than ever before. Among them, George Clooney's latest film. From Venice, Razia Iqbal reports.
The arrival of the A-list celebrity George Clooney in Venice, bringing with him a sprinkling of classic Hollywood stardust on a festival not short on glamour. His presence has aroused huge interest and shows how even the most established film festivals need to draw crowds.
We are going with a story that says that the U.S. Air Force tried Milo Radulovich without one shred of evidence and found him guilty of being a security risk.
Clooney is showing a film in competition about the real-life conflict between the journalist Ed Murrow and Senator Joseph McCarthy in the 1950s. As a director, he's candid about where he gets his ideas.
Oh, I steal from every director ever.
But the serious theme of journalistic courage in the face of the McCarthy witch hunts has contemporary relevance.
It's an interesting time to be involved in a debate about civil liberties and whether or not fear should be used to take away certain civil liberties.
George Clooney is the leader of a pack of American stars willing to make appearances in Venice. This has become an important pit stop for Hollywood celebrities. This year, Venice is showing more American films than it ever has before. Whether that's a good thing or not, the very presence of big names from Hollywood certainly changes the mood of this very European festival. The Oscar-winning American director Ron Howard is showing Cinderella Man starring Russell Crowe. And Brokeback Mountain has a rising Hollywood star who may laugh off American dominance here, but recognizes the importance of Venice.
In particular for this movie, it's a great launch because I think that, you know, Europe and in general being away from the States to bring a movie here first is a really good idea.
The crowds too think it's a good idea, but for all the benefits of having Hollywood here, it's been more than a decade since an American film walked away with the top prize. Stardust is one thing, star quality in filmmaking quite another. Razia Iqbal, BBC News, Venice.
We'll be back a little later with the latest on the day's headlines. But now it's time to join our news teams across the UK. Bye for now.
Hello, good evening. Families in the southwest are waiting anxiously tonight for news of their relatives caught up in Hurricane Katrina. Communication with America's Gulf Coast is virtually impossible because of the devastation caused by Monday's storm. George Matheson reports.
Plucking one victim of flood-devastated New Orleans to safety. But as the mass exodus from the city gets underway, what's happened to tens of thousands of people stranded by the devastation remains unknown. Margaret Smith can only fret at her home in East Cornwall, desperate for news of her daughter Beverly. She'd only recently moved to Biloxi, a town more or less obliterated by Katrina.
I suddenly realised a little while ago that she could be one on the list of dead. And this is something I've got to face, and I don't think I can. There's always hope, and I've just got to hope.
In New Orleans, the mayor has warned that the number of people killed could run into thousands in his city alone.
There's been an equally agonising wait for Cynthia McAllister at her home in South Somerset. Her sister Gloria is missing. Her parents have been found safe. Even so, there's still plenty of room for concern.
The stress, the trauma, the lack of food that they've gone, you know, with in the past 3 days, just everything they've experienced at age 81 and 82, don't really know how well they can continue to hold up. I mean, they've lost everything.
Until Katrina, New Orleans was a name synonymous with jazz. Two British-born musicians who've lived there for years are in Cornwall for the Bude Jazz Festival. They've both been cut off from their wives.
I spoke to her just before the storm hit, and
basically told her to take the parrot in the cage upstairs and the metal box with the passports and birth certificates and things. That's about all you can do, you know.
The damage is so vast. I really worry about what's she going to drink, what's she going to eat, because there's no water, there's no electricity, there's no way out.
The Foreign Office said today they hadn't received any reports of British casualties in America, but those who wait will be no less anxious for that.
The hostel in Brittany where Cornish schoolgirl Caroline Dickinson was murdered has gone out of business. It was used as a base for school trips, but since the killing, bookings have dropped dramatically. 55-year-old Francisco Arce Montes was convicted of Caroline's murder and jailed for 30 years. The pilots and crew of a British bomber shot down over Germany in World War II were finally laid to rest today, more than 60 years after their deaths. The men's families travelled from the southwest to Berlin for the special memorial service. Spotlight's John Maguire was there.
In the city they had set out to destroy, a crew of young men were finally laid to rest. One ceremonial coffin was carried by modern-day RAF servicemen. 61 years ago, these could have been colleagues, comrades, mates of the men who died. Earlier, there had been a commemorative service. One of the crew, Sergeant Norman Cooper, had asked for this piece of music to be played at his wedding or his funeral. Today, his brother Gordon, from Taunton, was here to see his long-lost brother's wish granted. All of the relatives agreed this had been a most fitting end.
Well, obviously tinged with sadness, you know, but still very glad that he's been found and can say our bye-byes and that's it. We're very happy. Might not look it, but I am.
This has been an extraordinary journey in so many ways, but above all, it's been about relationships, both old and new, especially with the German people. Once enemies, now firm friends.
John Maguire reporting. Spitfire pilots revisited their past today as a replica of the wartime fighter drew crowds in Cornwall. It was all part of Truro's commemorations of the 60th anniversary of World War II. David George has the story.
It's not perhaps what you'd expect to see on a shopping trip to Truro, but this icon of the Second World War has been brought to the city centre for all to see. The Mark 9 Spitfire was originally built as a gate guardian for an RAF base. It's been used for filmmaking, and although it's a replica, it's pretty authentic.
Canopy works, it slides. We have a door here that opens, which would normally have a radio in. All the panel lines and all the rivets that you see are absolutely faithfully reproduced. I repainted it last year in the D-Day markings that you see now. And we come back to the tail, it's even got produced on here the flush rivets that would make the aeroplane go faster.
This former Spitfire pilot who's flown 600 sorties is 80 today.
It feels just like yesterday. I could go in there and I could fly it. I could get in there and do a sortie with it. It's so difficult to fly, mind you, initially. And but once I get into that cockpit and strap myself in, I'd be away. Lovely. And I'd enjoy every minute of it.
The aircraft is sitting just a few metres from Truro's Pannier Market. The building used to be a garage. HTP Motors, agents for Alston, Lanchester, Alvis and Daimler, but pressed into service during the war as a repair shop for Spitfires. These pictures from the Royal Cornwall Museum show parts of the aircraft being rebuilt.
One of the other interesting pictures is of a girl looks like 16 years old and she's got an engagement ring on, she's got her nails polished. She probably knew that this was going to take place, the photograph, but she looks so young, it's unbelievable.
And he's getting a reputation for these kind of events. Last year he brought the City of Truro steam engine to the same spot. Beating that and the Spitfire may take some doing, but he has been seen muttering something about Concorde.
Well, on to the weather for tomorrow now. Any early mist will clear to leave a dry, warm and sunny day with light winds, top temperature 22 degrees. Now back to Fiona in London. Bye-bye.
And the main news tonight, thousands of people trapped in New Orleans are desperate for help as violence breaks out. Up to 300,000 people still need to be evacuated from New Orleans and the neighbouring states. And a video has emerged of one of the July the 7th London suicide bombers speaking about the attacks. Newsnight's on BBC Two now, but from all of us on the 10 o'clock team, good night.
Good evening. If, like me, you've had trouble sleeping in recent nights because of the humidity, it will be much fresher tonight from one extreme to the other. But we're in for some dry and sunny weather again for the majority of the UK in the next 48 hours before we see the next weather system troubling us later on Sunday. That's this massive cloud that you can see gathering here. But here's our window of clearer weather. Hence, the showers that are currently falling across the southeast and East Anglia will ease through the early hours, and for most of us it'll be a fine and a clear night with just a little bit of patchy mist and fog under the light winds, and of course a pretty chilly night, even I think cold enough in the glens and rural valleys of Wales for a touch of ground frost. But the sunshine should clear the mist and fog by around the middle of the rush hour in the morning, and it looks set fair for most of us. Any showers few and far between, much lighter than they have been. So for the majority, it should stay dry, for the majority of England and Wales at least, because I think towards Antrim and down, there will be a few showers come the afternoon, but the majority, I think, seeing just one. And 20 degrees isn't too bad with light winds. Nor's 19 in Aberdeen, very pleasant, and much brighter in the northeast of Scotland, where we had the remnants of yesterday's rain today. Some lovely weather as we head southwards across England and Wales. Some strong September sunshine. Even though temperatures won't be as high as they've been today, a couple of degrees down, it'll still feel lovely and warm. I doubt we'll notice the difference, to be honest with you. It will be beautiful. And barely a cloud in the sky, I think, across Devon and Cornwall. Perhaps just a little bit of patchy fair weather cloud developing across the West Country moors and perhaps across the Snowdonia National Park, but great weather for heading out and about for a walk. That sunshine should then continue as we head through tomorrow evening. But tomorrow evening and overnight we'll probably pick up a little bit more cloud for a time, just low cloud and mist, and that southerly wind will prevent temperatures from falling quite as low as they will go tonight. And that southerly wind, or southeasterly wind even, will keep the rain at bay for one more day. So for most of us, Saturday looks like the driest day of the weekend. Great news if you're heading off to the World Cup qualifiers, and it'll warm up as well. Temperatures climbing a couple of degrees, I think, on tomorrow for most of the country, and then a degree or two more again on Sunday. So the heat, the humidity, they start to rise again as we head through the weekend. Good news for many. However, although it'll stay dry and bright for many, that heat and humidity may well trigger a few late in the afternoon thunderstorms. We'll keep you posted.
It's shaping up to be one of the highlights of this year's proms. BBC One, next.
Find out more about the Southwest on Inside Out, why buying a car at the roadside could lead you here. Inside Out reveals the 16th century Devon artist who painted a queen. Inside Out visits a bird sanctuary with a difference.
There are some species of birds that are positively not welcome here.
Inside Out, 3 surprising stories from where you live. Monday at 7:30 on BBC One.
Again, I'll hit you back harder.
BBC One joins Alan Titchmarsh now at the Royal Albert Hall, the BBC Proms.